I'm so happy to welcome Del Gonzales to the Audio Garden today. And Del, as we're speaking, it will be over by the time this airs, but you're participating in a festival here in New York City. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's Phys Fest NYC, and it started 3 years ago. And it's a culmination of, for me at least, a project that I've been working on for about a year. And I've been lucky enough to perform it. It was curated and performed at Phys Fest NYC, and this festival hosts a large range of people within the physical theater sphere, and that includes mimes, clowns, dancers of different sorts. Whatever people define as physical theater is what happens at this festival, and it's amazing. They have lots of workshops and performances and free events, and it was really great to be a part of community for a week. And I'm happy that it's still going on, and I still have a couple days left. So tonight I'll go see a show, and then I'll attend some panels later this weekend. So I'm really excited for that.
So it sounds like you're getting a lot out of seeing the other performances and meeting other people participating in the festival.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny enough, the piece that I created, The Adventures of Beastie, it really, why I created the piece was really from inspiration at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I was performing a piece called Things We Will Miss there, which I actually also performed at the Phys Fest NYC. And I went to 2 or 3 shows a day in Edinburgh. And that creative energy literally spawned a dream in my brain where I dreamed in theater, and I dreamed of the concept of my show. And a year later, I created it, and luckily enough, put it on in New York City.
That's a great story. So tell us a little more about the Adventures of Beastie, which people can find on Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah, The Adventures of Beastie. It's actually a really simple concept. It's the adventures of Beastie, right? So it centers around this character, Beastie. And Beastie is, you would describe Beastie maybe as a sweet creature. Think about like Lilo and Stitch, kind of just like a really sweet creature guy. It's
Uh-huh.
gendered. I don't know why. So how he was created, actually funny enough, he was created through just joke, like me and my partner, my girlfriend joking around, and we both kind of created this character together. This really sweet character. Just sounds like this. Oh, hello.
So you had this concept of Beastie. You and your partner had this concept of Beastie, and you're part of this physical theater festival. So I'm assuming that this Adventures of Beastie is very physical. So how does this work together between having this concept and you were telling me before we started, it's not necessarily easy to translate to audio what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, how do you do the magic between this concept of a character and giving them some lines, right? You're
Right.
writing for the character, but there's
Yes.
more to it than that.
A lot of the discovery, I think, for me and in my process was just purely, I mean, physical. It's just really being in the space where I can create something like a theater or any kind of studio. For me, that was at Hamilton College, which I graduated from last year. I was fresh out of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, had this concept, this character, and it was time to create my thesis project, whatever that may be, whatever I chose. And I was like, you know what? I had this dream. I think I'm gonna make this into a show. I have the opportunity. It can be created here. I have the space and the resources. So I went into the
Mhm.
studio, and at first, well, of course, we actually had to write a 10-page proposal. So I did that, did some writing. And then from there, it was really big learning curve because I had some clown training in the past, but I had never created a clown show. So to do that, I had to create my clown. And what that meant, that started off with some Lecoq exercises. It's a clown from France.
So, is Beastie your clown, or are you a clown who's doing a Beastie part? I'm sorry to be so particular, but I'm curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. BC, I would not say is my clown.
Okay.
Uh, and I would say as a performer, I'm a baby clown. I've taken a couple workshops and I trained at RADA, and at RADA we had clown classes, but I've not done intensive clown work. And I just think there's just levels to the game. I'm a baby clown, and Beastie is this amalgamation of my clown with a character concept that really exist within the story theater concept that we created in the Adventures of Beastie. The original exercises, one of them was really interesting. My professor, Margarita Blush, trained clown and passed down this lineage of clown training to me. And the first exercise was like finding the clown's body. And what that meant was I would just stand still without trying to fix anything, just completely just relax and be myself. And someone would watch me, and they would just like it took about like 5 minutes of them just like looking, no one saying anything, just looking at my body, analyzing every like how my neck was being held up and how like and I'm completely relaxed. I'm not trying to do anything, like my feet position. And then my professor said, "Okay, great. Now," and then to the person that looked at me, "Stand like how Dell was standing." And the person stood like how I was standing, and my head just went, "Wow, that's me. I don't know what you're doing, but you're standing." I mean, I could feel me and you. It was really strange. And then we talked about it and was like, "Okay, so what were the conscious choices you made to this other person? You made within your body to depict what you saw in Dell." And for me, I think I hold a lot more tension in the right side of my body. And it's funny that if you look at like videos of me from my childhood, I'd always hold myself like this, and naturally standing,
For our
my
listeners, your
head's
head was tilted to the side.
yes, yes, my head tilts to its right side. But what we did from there is to really get in the body of the clown is to really exaggerate that tension and
Uh-huh.
walk, move in a space holding that tension. And then from there, improving scenes, and it escalated from there. That is how I physically found a piece, but also much of the piece and its inspiration was created through interviews with my family members about my childhood. And we also watched a bunch of childhood videos as well. So I really embracing kind of this inner child within the character.
And then accentuating some of the eccentricities, maybe you could say, of the
Yeah.
character or, like you said, tensions. But I'd like to talk about your family for a moment because I'd like to acknowledge the connection that brought you to this interview. Your dad, Randy Gonzales, who wrote Settling St. Malo, was a guest on Listen and Be Heard. I think it was our first season he was interviewed by Tony Robles. I'm always talking about how we are the network, and this is how things happen. A proud papa is talking about what his son, just freshly graduating, is up to in New York City, a New York City premiere. And, of course, I was very happy to hear about that and extend an invitation. But you're working on a documentary with your dad. Could you tell us a bit about that documentary project?
Yes, this project has been in the works for some time now, and I'm really excited about it being shown to people. So it's a documentary with poetry, and there's some visuals, and my dad was on camera, which he loved. For my part in that, I read some poetry, and I did this news voice that I was really trying to embody through my voice, kind of like a 1930s, 1920s New Orleans reporter. But I added a little bit of Atlantic British accent in there to really make it its own thing.
Oh,
And
so
it's
you're actually acting in the documentary.
yeah,
I
yes, yeah.
do you feel connected to that, though? Because the stories of, settling Saint Malo are really the story of Filipino immigrants creating Saint Malo. Do you feel a lineage from those stories through your dad to what you're doing today? How has that affected your experience? Because it's not only a collection of poetry, it's a documentation, an experience that has not necessarily been written in the history books, but an important one that your dad is connected to, and so you must be also.
Yeah, I definitely do see myself within that lineage. It's really interesting having a father who is so engrossed in a history and promoting and uplifting voices from the past, particularly Filipinos in Louisiana. I find it I mean, it's really interesting because when I was a kid, I was racialized very much as just generally Asian. We moved from Abu Dhabi to Louisiana, and when I moved to Louisiana and Pearl River, Louisiana, which is pretty rural, there was really only white kids. So and me and my brother. So how they perceived us was just generally Asian, and I think because of that, I lost a sense of Filipino-ness.
Mhm.
We would go to Filipino community events, but I would distance and this is the story of many Asian Americans, I believe. I would distance myself from my Filipino-ness in any sense. I would kind of pretend that I didn't like the food, like when my mom would make some Filipino food, I'd have friends over and be like, "Yeah, it's not that good," but, I really loved it. It's really interesting to have a father that really educated me in the household later on, when I had those experiences, and then someone who can talk about race and who can talk about being Filipino and kind of, like you said, that lineage in Louisiana. And really during COVID, he gave me a bunch of Asian American literature, and I read and read and read, and I was like, "Wow, okay, so my experience isn't the only one, and I am part of something larger going on here." And in regards to being Filipino, I will tell other Filipino friends now, I will, like, proudly tell them about the history that my dad has not uncovered, but brought to attention. I'm proud of my dad, and I love sharing that with other people, and it's funny how little people know about Filipino history in Louisiana, and particularly other Filipinos.
You've been doing this Phys Fest. What's coming up after that for you?
What I hope from this festival, I wanted to see how my piece was perceived by the general public. I performed it initially at Hamilton College. So my audience was derived of professors and students and a lot of people that knew me generally.
Mhm.
So, and within clowning is about failing and failing and failing and failing and failing and getting up and embracing the fail. And I think that I was in an environment where I was uplifted each time I failed, no matter what. And I think this environment was a test for me because it was a place where I was unsure about how it would be perceived. And at sometimes I was like, "Are people liking it?"
Mm.
Of course, with anything being presented in front of the audience, you can kind of feel what they're or you think you can feel what they're feeling. And I think it was perceived positively, and from that, I want to now hopefully bring my piece to other places and to other venues. And I think I just really wanna share more of this work with other people and adapt it and change it and let it grow with me. I think it's my first piece that I've created, and I wanna create more, and I want to share that with the world, but
So
outside
how
of
can the world follow you and stay in touch with what you're doing?
for the Adventures of Beastie, if you wanna follow along, there's an Instagram that we've created called Adventures of Beastie. It looks like someone else took The Adventures of Beastie, which is crazy because I thought that was an original idea, but someone has that name.
You have your own website as well, right?
It's delgonzales.com, so no one else has that one.
Yes, Del Gonzales with a S at the end,
Yes.
Gonzales. And Del, I wanna thank you so much for joining me here in the audio garden. I have a couple more questions for you. In season 3, I was talking kind of exclusively about the phenomenon of banning books, but this seems to be expanding at this point in time into a greater question of freedom of speech and expression.
I'm thinking about my Louisiana public school education, which at the time was ranked number 50, I believe,
Mm.
in the country. And I don't recall having an experience in which I was confronted with wanting to read something and it was banned, but I do recall learning somewhat of a revisionist history. And it's really funny having had gone to Hamilton College with most people coming from the Northeast, most other students coming from the Northeast and talking about our education and what we learned in high school and reflecting on where our different backgrounds. And every time I'd reflect on my Louisiana education, I'd be like, yeah, wow, we learned the Civil War completely different from how people in the Northeast learned about it, and
In
it
what
was
way?
and it's funny because I don't think it was necessarily the textbooks. I do actually think it was the teachers. I think the consensus within the classroom was that the Civil War was not a thing of race and was rather a thing of states' rights in the South.
Okay.
Oh, of course, the classic, which I later learned, of course. I didn't know at the time. And then talking at home with my professor dad, I learned.
Uh-huh. You got another version of the story. I know what you're talking about, and I remember my son coming home one day when he was in, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade in Greenville, South Carolina, and his teacher was telling him that Malcolm X was the devil. And so that was the history lesson I needed to address on that day, and so I think I'm a little familiar with what
Yeah.
you're talking about, and I thank you for that. And I just wanted to ask you if you could improvise and give us a phrase using the words "listen and be heard."
Ooh, the pressure is on. I love
No
I
pressure.
I love the name "Listen and Be Heard." I really do. It feels like something is reciprocated there. It's listening in the space and then feeling like it really reminds me of acting because that's what the entire craft is about. It's about listening to the other person and believing and entrusting that they will hear you and really hear you, really listen to you.
Thank you so much, Del Gonzales, for spending this time with me in the audio garden.
Thank you so much, Martha. It's been a really lovely time. Thank you for having me.
Say hi to your dad. And
Hi,
tell
Dad.
him we want to hear about that documentary.
Yes. I can't wait to hear more. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.